Death is an inevitable part of life, but the journey going home, as we call it, can take many forms. In today's episode of Embracing the Inevitable, we'll be exploring an end of life option currently available nationwide. To provide deeper insights, we'll be speaking with those who have firsthand experience supporting patients and families with their choices. Today, we'll be joined by Lynn Principe, a death doula, a conscious dying educator, funeral celebrant, and doula mentor. Lynn's life work is to support dying people and their loved ones before, during, and after death as a guide, supporter, and companion. She is passionate about changing the way we view the end of our lives and is committed to initiating these conversations through her work as the president of the Florida End of Life Doula Association and as a professional guest speaker. Lynn lives in Dunedin, Florida. Welcome, Lynn.
Hi, Judy. Thank you so much.
So, Lynn, the reason that I asked you to be here with me today, well, there's many reasons, and I'm hoping we're going to share a great deal. But I know that you have assisted with voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, which is also known as VSED. And I'm hoping you'll be able to walk us through several key considerations for people to realize with this option.
Oh, yes, I'm happy to.
One of the first questions I have, and please help me understand a little better too, can you take a few moments just to explain what VSED is
Yeah.
and what a patient choosing this option can actually expect?
Sure. So, VSED, as you said, is voluntary stopping of eating and drinking. It's a way to hasten one's death. It is a legal way to hasten death, and it's legal throughout the United States, which is widely unknown. It's speeding up a natural process of dying through stopping of eating and drinking.
Okay, I know that it hastens death, but I always thought that when you stopped drinking and you stopped eating, that there was like this 3-day window. I don't know where we got that. It was in science class or something like that. But that's not necessarily true when someone uses VSED at the end of life.
Exactly. The timing of the beginning of the stopping of eating and drinking to when someone actually dies varies, and that will depend on the present health of the person who is doing the VSED, not only their health, but how much they weigh, maybe how much extra body fat they have, the present condition of their organs will determine how long that process will take. And it could be 3 days, it could be over 2 weeks, and it really will depend on the person.
That's what I've heard. It could be up to 14 days. Oh, so even though someone has stopped drinking and stopped eating, doesn't necessarily mean that they may pass away in 2 to 3 days. It could take longer, and it's totally based on the individual.
Exactly.
What are some of the key things a death doula or the family member should be prepared for when supporting someone through VSED?
Things that are important to prepare with VSED. One of the first places to begin is to make sure that your medical surrogate is aware of your wishes and is ready to advocate for you and support you. And that's something that a doula can help with. That's a really important piece of it. If we're going to talk about the practical things, there's the medical surrogate paperwork. You want to make sure it's in place. And if you're in an assisted living facility, you want to make sure that is something that is allowed by the facility that you are living in. In many cases, it is not allowed because of possible neglect, lawsuits, or anything that may come up. They will not allow you to do VSED in their facility. And in that case, the patient would have to be moved before the beginning of this process. So those are two really big
Wow.
key components of it before you even begin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sense.
And Another huge piece of it is to make sure that you have medical care and comfort care on board and ready to go. Those are the biggest pieces of this being a successful and um, an experience that is not full of suffering. And that would require to have medical care on board and making sure that you're comfortable through the process. So that would be determined by having a medical team that is on board with your wishes and will support you. And if you're not on hospice, to be in touch with the hospice and letting them know that within a few days you would be wanting to be admitted to hospice.
Okay, that makes sense. The particular patient that I witnessed went to an outpatient facility, but was monitored closely by her provider and the staff there. So that was her choice. And if insurance didn't pay for that, it was out of pocket in her case. But if you are on hospice, then your hospice team, it will be an integral part of that decision. The question that I have, having done some fasting in my lifetime, is then knowing that eventually my brain starts running on ketones. And when my brain is running on ketones, it's actually very alert some periods of time. Is that something that may happen to a patient?
Yes. And there, again, depending on the health and condition of the person doing the process, there will be different stages. Another big piece of that preparation is having everyone aware that there may be stages that this person is going through and how to support them through each one. There will be stages of anxiety, perhaps. First can be a powerful source of anxiety. And so that's where caregivers and doulas would make sure that those comfort care measures are in place. And we could definitely go over those as well. The anxiety may happen. There may be times when the person doing the visa forgets why they're doing it. And their advocates are there to remind them. This is a place where doulas can come in and create a video. I recommend that the person doing the VSED has two videos in place. One of them is for themselves, right? Would be a video that, say, if I were doing VSED, I would make a video talking to myself and reminding me why I decided to do this. Because there are going to be times when I might forget or it might be too difficult. And that reminder of why I decided to do this might be helpful. The other video would be taken for anyone who may be questioning why this is happening or questioning that it may not be the person's decision or they're not in the right mind to make this decision. So that second video would say, this is who I am. I am making this decision for my well being and what's best for me. And this is why. And so that those two are in place. This is something that I learned in my visa training that there's a 3 ask policy. So the first time someone says, can I have some water? You might remind them, this is what we're doing. I give you, and I can go over some of those measures. There's something I can do to moisten your mouth that would make you more comfortable. The second time might be again, this is why we're doing this. Here, let me show you this video that you made for yourself. The third time, you would say, yes, here's some water. We're not there to deny someone or to make them suffer, but we're there to advocate for themselves, even to themselves, right? If in case they have these moments of, I'm not sure about this, and you're always going to give them the option.
That's interesting. I love the idea of the video, and that's a helpful reminder. And if you are in the position where you can work with a doula, then the doula, if you don't know how to make the video on your phone or whatever, that doula could help you with that, as well as help you make the video for those that may stop by to visit and finds out that you're doing VSED and is very torn by that and doesn't agree with it, because I'm assuming that probably happens too.
Exactly. And I think that a doula and or a family member, we might sometimes we'll call them a gatekeeper. They want to make sure that the person who's doing this is in charge of what's happening in the surroundings. And so we would ask them beforehand, who do you want there? Who do you not want there? So that there's not a lot of stress that's being placed on what's already a tender environment.
Yes, of course. Okay, that's good to know. And then would they have also probably already included this in their advance directive and or living will, as far as this is one of the choices or end of life choices I may choose? That would be another part of where they have documented their choices that could be used to help someone understand that that's their choice.
Exactly. And one
Okay.
other piece of what, as far as paperwork goes with VSED, when they actually do leave their body and the death is pronounced, the death certificate will list the illness that they were dying from as the cause of death.
Okay. And similar to medical aid in dying. Great. That's great. And I don't think as many people know about it. I don't think they really understand the end of life options in general, which is why we're doing this podcast. Okay, so now I want to talk, and I get that this is probably also patient specific, but there could be some physical symptoms, and you mentioned some comfort measurements. I'm assuming if they are on hospice, there's going to be some kind of swab or something that is just still not giving them water, but providing a lubricant or something for the mouth. And I know with my patients, everything gets so dry around the teeth. So sometimes you just have to break up that dried mucus for them to make them a little comfortable. Okay.
Exactly. Those are, I think, mouth care is one of the biggest ways to keep someone comfortable, especially if they're dehydrated, as they would be.
Okay.
Rather than water, olive oil or coconut oil can be very helpful because it will stay moist longer. So that's something that we
Yeah.
would use in those times. A humidifier in the room is helpful. Something that I have not used, but I was taught to provide in my training is a water-based KY jelly is really comforting in the
Okay.
mouth. It keeps the mouth
Yeah.
more moist, as well as, there's that chewing motion that we miss, right? I think there's endorphins released happening when we're chewing. I
Okay.
have my puppy right now. He loves to chew. It makes him really calm. So having even a teether available, the kind that we would use for a small child, and keeping it in the freezer and perhaps even putting that lubricant on the teether. And that can give the mouth a lot of comfort. I think that there's some misconception. I have seen a hospice team let a person know that was doing VSED that ice chips were okay. And that actually will prolong the process and add to more suffering. And so it is really important that when the process begins, that there are no liquids. And so having this mouth care in place and you're prepared for that discomfort really goes a long way. Because I think that it really is the hardest part. The hunger, I think, goes away pretty quickly, but it's the thirst that is more difficult.
And that makes sense. And if you're managing the thirst, and I would imagine it's also cool or lukewarm lost for the eyes if there's little things in your eyes and things like that. So making sure that you're keeping the skin in that area clean.
Right. And so I think it can put more of a burden on the body to start in water once you've started the process.
Now, does anybody have any kind of cramping or anything like that? I mean, is there any pain?
That would probably be on an individual basis depending on someone's diagnosis. And that's where having your
Okay.
medical team there for that the medical side of the comfort care is really important. Medications that can help with anxiety or any kind of breathing difficulties or muscle pain. And from a doula's perspective, we would treat our end of the comfort care like we would for any of our dying clients. the meditations that we do, or so some of us might do Reiki or massage, we would ask them beforehand, so what are the things that provide you comfort? And have those things ready to go. Maybe there's certain music that's really calming or brings joy. So just
Yes.
having everything prepared for those moments when that's needed is really important. And that's something that we do as doulas, regardless of how someone is dying.
Yes, and I have used those in my own practice with definitely even with a headset or some kind of earbuds of their music that they generally really enjoy is soothing. It puts them in the zone. And then the energy work, of course, absolutely. Oh, I think you already answered the questions about the families considering that really have to understand what it is that their family member wants, because one of the things that I've witnessed myself is that in a hospice facility or a hospital when someone's dying, everybody's trying to feed the patient.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Um,
And I think that is how we express love in a lot of ways. And so I
yes.
think it's difficult to watch someone dying. It's always difficult to watch someone you love dying. And to be able to feed them, we're hoping to provide comfort when most cases, especially when someone's dying, that's not going to help them at all or what they need physically. Often when I'm with someone who's dying, I might place a taste on the lips just to give that pleasure of favorite food. But you're right, it's not helpful to feed someone who's dying because the body is
Yeah.
naturally going to stop eating and drinking. So with VSED,
Yes.
they're just deciding to do that a little sooner.
Now, with VSED, would you see the same kind of secretions that happen at the end of life? Would they still go through the breathing that happens and possibly the secretions that happen as the body slowly begins to turn itself off?
Yes, after a certain number of days of not eating and drinking, the body will begin to shut down as it would not normally.
Okay. So that's another reason not to try and feed someone or give them an oral medication at that point if they're already dealing with secretions. And I would imagine everyone is trying to work at getting those secretions to drain somehow to help the patient. And even though hospice isn't around 24/7, there's still a mechanism that goes along with that to ensure you have the medications that might be needed later on for comfort and things like that. Then there's probably a list of things that they should have on hand. And you've mentioned quite a few of those already.
Exactly. If the hospice is not involved, I think they'd still need to have some kind of medical team on hand. And having hospice on board is really helpful when the patient actually does die because they can call the time of death. Otherwise, you'd have to call 911 and have a medical examiner come. You wouldn't be able to have those moments at home with your loved one and it as you could when you're with hospice. It becomes a very different kind of event, one that is less calm and perhaps sacred. Hospice is not involved.
Yes, that makes perfect sense to me because depending on who you have caring for you and how emotionally attached, they're going through their own grief, how difficult that might be for everyone in that situation where as a doula coming in or hospice people coming in to help out will certainly shift that dynamics a bit. So it isn't all my fault I let this happen kind of situation.
That's a burden that no one should feel, especially if it's the dying person's wish that you're following.
Yeah, I get that.
As we mentioned, it's that preparation piece that I think is really important. So there's some good resources online. I would educate myself or my clients on before embarking on the process.
Okay.
Uh, Final Exit Network has some great resources on their website.
I'll put those links below the video for people to be able to find. Tell me, Lynn, what about physical preparation prior to your commitment to doing VSED?
Oh, it's a great question. It's important to prepare physically so that it's not such a shock when you don't eat and drink anymore. So I would suggest that you start to taper off food leading in the week or so leading up to the date that you plan to start your reset process and taper off drinks as well. Some people may choose to do a diuretic leading up to that time so that there's less exiting from the body. And that helps to prepare as well so that maybe if you're slowly tapering off the eating and drinking that, like I said, is not such a shock and can help with the cravings as well.
So, like an intermittent fasting type of thing where maybe you just allow yourself one meal a day or a little meal a day and then you taper off.
For many of our cultures, food is a celebration. Like we talked about it being an act of love for many of us, right? And so many memories are. So why not have a food celebration, have your favorite things before you begin this weaning off process, right? So if that is still something that they enjoy, I would suggest celebrating it, having some favorite things, and then begin the weaning off.
I want to thank you for joining us. And Lynn, you've recently published your first book called Walking Me Home, an End of Life Planning Guide. So, would you like to share a little bit about your book, what's in it, and where people can find it?
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to. It's called Welcome Me Home. It's an end of life planning guide, as you mentioned. I chose that title because my hope is once you complete the workbook, you can hand it over to your loved ones with the words, "This is how you can walk me home." So I wanted everything in the book to be really intuitively laid out plan for how someone wishes their last days and weeks and months to go. And so I began with the things that you'd want in place, practical things. So all the paperwork, so lists and checklists and counts, all those things that if you know someone that you've helped at the end of their lives, the things that you can't find the passwords, you don't know where the accounts are. So all those would be there. Or if they're not there, this is where they are. So places to explain these things. There's a funeral planning guide there, emotional completion work. So a lot of journaling space. And then spiritually, what matters most to me in my spiritual life, what rituals or ceremonies matter to me, place for memories. So it's kind of a spectrum guide to the end of life process.
Wow, that sounds wonderful. And that's a nice gift idea too for someone in your family that maybe needs to prepare and can be done together, I would imagine.
It's a conversation starter. I imagine that people can do it together or you can do it in groups, grab a bunch of friends and or hire a doula to lead you and do it as a group workshop. That's something that I've done with groups as well, or something that you could give to your parents. It is holiday season, so I'm hoping that is something under the tree this year, or however you choose to give gifts. And it's easily found on Amazon, so it's accessible. Yeah,
Okay,
and I hope that
great.
it's a tool for doulas as well. I'd like for to see doulas use it with their clients.
I think that's really helpful for doulas because even though I've been a nurse for years, when I got my diagnosis, I knew immediately that I had to become a doula. It was just a thing that happens. And I would imagine a lot of nurses do as well. But even though you have experience with many people's death, it's still helpful to have a tool that sort of walks you down the path that you can help your clients with. So I think that's really a great idea. So I really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better and hearing your soft and gentle voice. I can imagine that could be a great comfort to any client that you work with. And in your experience, what you found to be true is by considering what matters at the end, we begin to live fully with the time we have now.
That is what I have
That's
seen to be
beautiful.
true.
Yeah. And I really feel like facing the inevitable. At some point, we got a little lost on the fact that the inevitable is death, and death is something that we're all going to experience at some point in time. And that's okay. But when you face that resistance and just work with it, it makes for a much more peaceful exit.
I agree completely. And like you said, it informs the time that we do have. So we might look at that time a little differently when we know that we have a finite amount of it.
In today's emotionally charged but necessary conversation, we explored one end of life option currently available. If you found this information helpful, please share this podcast with someone who may benefit from learning of the full range of end of life choices. Planning ahead is one of the greatest gifts we can give our loved ones. Thank you for joining us today.